as we started doing all this cover cropping around my area is, we've got 53,000 acres of cropland that for the most part every year just sit there after a no-till corn and bean rotation with nothing but residue on it, maybe some henbit, chickweed, buttercup, some of that kind of stuff. So we've got all these critters around the area, and you'd see them out in the fields after harvest with some of the waste grain that ran through the combine, and then after that, they're just back to depending on what kind of mass crop and browse that's there in the natural habitat. And then we get all these cover crop fields, and then all of a sudden, every one of them, you see deer in them in the evenings, in the mornings. You talk to producers, they're talking about rabbits back on these fields if they haven't seen any rabbits, anything like that. So, just in general, we've had a county that, now we've got about 35,000 acres of food plots in the county that used to not be there. So as far as the carrying capacity and the health overall of a wildlife herd, and I know we're not talking a lot probably about deer and stuff, but there's a lot of different things that benefit from that, not only just from the deer, but the usage of birds. We got the University of Tennessee, they're down here right now doing like a 3-year study on comparing no-till fields versus these cover crop fields on migratory birds and resident birds and what kind of usage they're seeing out of that. And it's pretty amazing, just the first little bit of data they've got, how much more bird usage is on these cover crop fields. So it's not just, for deer and turkey, but, everything, uses them. And then, the cool thing about it is, all these cover fields that we've got here in production agriculture from the start of this thing, one thing we've done right is we've not been scared of diversity. And, we started out real simple, with, a 5-way mix, where we had a couple legumes, couple cereal grains, and a brassica or two in it. Now it's just commonplace that all these fields have got 8 to 12 different things planted in them. And we're mostly talking about fall cover crops where we're in a corn bean rotation and we're coming, just using these winter cover crops. But, in every one of these fields, you're going to have 3 or 4 legumes, 3 or 4 cereals, and a couple brassicas. And, we were doing this, from the promotion of soil biology and, from a production ag standpoint, looking at something that we could really prime the biology and then also carry enough biomass to get us through where we could keep the ground covered throughout our growing season. But then the more you start thinking about it and you start looking at these critters that's using these fields, when you got like a monoculture out there, say back in the day when we were just, say a cover crop of wheat or a cover crop of cereal rye, and don't get me wrong, that's better than not having anything out there where we're at least, still absorbing sunlight and pumping carbon in the ground. But the cool part about when you get these multi-species and you start thinking about wildlife benefits, and let's just think as, for a deer, for example, well, if you just got a monoculture and that deer is using that field throughout its growing season, well, they're going to be locked into whatever carbon nitrogen ratio, whatever protein to energy ratio is in that one species that's growing. It's not going to change based on the deer's needs. Mm-hmm. It's just going to be whatever it is. But then when you've got all these other things out there, they're not maturing at the same time. Inherently, they've got different level of proteins. They've got different levels of energy to them. So now, instead of, that deer having to go to a buffet that ain't got nothing but, mashed potatoes every evening, now they're going to a full buffet. They got mashed potatoes, steak, gravy, dessert. So everything out there as far as from a forage grazing standpoint, if they're at a time, that old mama doe is lactating or whatever, or that buck's, trying to put on antler development, or, they're coming out of the rut. We've got stuff out there where if they need high energy, they can be getting high energy. They're getting protein, so it all balances out. It's just a well-balanced, if you think about it, if you're running a grazing operation with cattle, how much better your livestock are going to be when they can go out there and basically have free choice on, what they need.
Well, and that's, and honestly, you mentioned soil health, soil biology. and these are the things I started looking at with the diversity, but when it hit home for me is when we got into the species complementariness, and obviously, the quorum sensing, and we started to notice that, in these mixes, these complementary mixes and high diverse mixes, the ones that everyone laughed at first when I put 17 different species in a bag, deer will eat forages, plants that they wouldn't normally eat in a monoculture. In other words, how many times have I been told that hairy vetch is a super good cover crop here in Pennsylvania because the deer won't eat it? Well, if you stick hairy vetch in with, which I do, in with 15 or 16 or 18 different species, I'm here to tell you that they will absolutely wear it out. And, going back to one of my favorite podcasts was my podcast with Dr. Fred Provenza in talking about nutritional wisdom, flavor feedback mechanisms, and just the way that all that works, and that whitetails, all of us, including us, all game species, non-game species, all the critters, do express nutritional wisdom. Those of us who crave salt, you crave certain foods. Pregnant women can relate to that. There's the body understands what it needs more of and less of to maintain that balance. So obviously, and you were one of the first guys who I talked to. You probably remember when I called you all frustrated about I'd been consulting with the larger food plot companies, and man, they've just been so focused on showing guys with white coats out in clover monoculture fields, looking like they're planting or breeding plants to make the superior deer clover that's going to grow the largest antlers. And I just knew something wasn't right. And now that we got down into the soil, and that I've done a lot of work with Dr. Rick Haney, and obviously listen to guys like you, I've learned so much, and certainly appreciate your initial input and your continued input on the reload blends.
Oh yeah, and that's just like, I remember that conversation we had, and I think it spun off from a podcast or something that came from the National No-Till Conference, where I gave a talk, and I think I'd said something that kind of struck you as if you got straight legumes out there, you're going to cannibalize your soil.
Pause. Stop right there. And I'm not interrupting you to be rude, but I'm interrupting you because I have to. I'm going to do an intro here. I love starting off like this. I said when I started the podcast, keep that in mind, Adam, by the way, because I want to drill down on that very point. That's the most incredible hook we could have dropped right there. So I'm going to interrupt real quick. This is the Drop-Tine podcast. Obviously, you've been listening to a conversation that I have several times a year with a good friend of mine. I'm proud to call him a good friend. He put Coffee County, Tennessee on the map. Mr. Adam Daugherty. Adam's a NRCS District Conservationist. That's a tough one. Obviously from Coffee County, Tennessee. I'm sitting in Pennsylvania. I wish I was sitting there in Coffee County, Tennessee. It is on the verge of the new year, so I just want to take an opportunity to wish everybody, including you, Adam, a happy, prosperous, and healthy new year. And I do want to say really, really quick, spring reload. I just mentioned spring reload. Last year we ran out. So I've been pushing Green Cover, who I work with. Everybody knows that, to get everything ready earlier this year so we can start sooner. Our goal was to start around Christmas. We do not have the sunflowers in yet, so the producers haven't gotten us the sunflowers. They promise us that they're going to clean those here after the new year and get them sent over. So once we get the sunflowers, we can blend, bag, and ship. But we are taking pre-orders. We opened them up a day or so ago, December 28th or 29th, I believe. So the orders are flowing in already. If you want to order spring reload, go ahead and buy what you need, pre-order it, and they'll be shipping at the end of January, landing, early February. Plenty of time to get them in your hands. But so, all right, without any more of that, I'm proud to call him a friend, Mr. Adam Daugherty from Tennessee. One of my favorite things about Adam and his little bio he sent me, which, man, he's got so many good things in this. I probably won't get a chance to mention them all because I want you to hear more from Adam. And every time I'm talking to this guy, I'm taking notes. So if you don't have a notepad with you, grab one, take notes. If you're in the pickup or at work and you can't, fine, listen to it a second time. I always listen to my favorite podcast twice, take notes the second time. But one of my favorite things in here, Adam, I told you this earlier, I get a kick out of this. It says he has been a traditional bow hunter since 1997, and trad bow hunting is something that I picked up here recently, and I'm trying to get better at it. I've got a spot and stalk mule deer hunt coming up here in Arizona. I really want to take the trad bow, but I think I'm going to have to take the compound. So anyway, Adam got his bachelor's plant and soil science from Tennessee Tech, and then his master's in biosystems engineering technology from the University of Tennessee. His PhD from the Soil Health School of Hard Knocks, 2013 and ongoing. I love that part. And he's been with the NRCS for 18 years. He's currently, like I said, the District Conservationist in Coffee County, Tennessee. One of the things I'm very, very fortunate about is I get to travel the whole country. And every time my boots land in a different county or a different state, I have to recalibrate with where I'm at. And fortunately, I have some incredible individuals I get to draw on for that knowledge. And Adam is one of them. But we'll get into the rest of this, Adam. I just want to get you back on topic and back on the show. So I guess formally welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time during the holidays to record it with us. And you're back on with us.
Oh man, it's awesome to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation because you know most of the time I'm on the stage with a PowerPoint running and got a bunch of producers sitting out there, and I'm thinking production agriculture, and soil health, and and this is just kind of a side gig that's a passion of mine. Once where I've been an outdoorsman for a while and have an appreciation for nature and ecology. And, just some of the things that go on in my mind that we've applied in production agriculture and how it fits together, it goes together better than peas and carrots, in wildlife management. And to be honest, we probably has more potential for the transition for the wildlife managers, both economically and just in, making their piece of ground, whether if it's just for viewing wildlife or increasing diversity or putting broadheads through rib cages, just the potential it has, for the wildlife manager. So I'm looking forward to having the discussion. Don't know where it's going to go, but we're going to talk about soil health and critters for a little while.
There you go. You can vouch for me that some of my favorite conversations are straight up shoot from the hip with guys who are overqualified, and that's you. So one of the things I've liked about talking to you is like you said, you are a sportsman, you're a bow hunter, you love turkey hunting, I know, you love deer hunting, and coming from your background of formal education, your ability to observe the reaction or responses of wildlife, of critters to the practices and principles that you're applying in production agriculture and row crop or cover cropping has always been so helpful to me. So I kind of want to get into that stuff here in a little bit, but first I want to backtrack to this topic of cannibalism, which is cool no matter how you look at it. When I used to work with like Tech Amati, and communicated heavily with Whitetail Institute and I'm not taking shots by any means, but they're obviously not competitors. They're not in the same market. They're in it for a completely different purpose, which is great also. But one of my frustrations is that their lack of diversity, I felt, and I didn't quite know why, a decade ago, but these monoculture plots of clover, and then, obviously throwing in chicory helped a little bit, but it still didn't really scratch the surface. We saw when I got with Rick Haney and we started doing some research in these wildlife plots and really looking at the soil in specific species and how it interacts and how it equates to the nutrient profile in specific plants. It dawned on me that we are depleting the soil just by what we choose to put in the soil. And that was kind of fascinating to me. Obviously, we talk all the time about how a plow can disrupt the ecosystem and cause dysfunction, but it didn't really dawn on me that based on my selection of plants can have an impact on the soil health. And obviously, we started looking at some of these monoculture clover stands and then brassica, dominant brassica stands. And we saw that the soil health calculation and obviously the only true biological test that we have is CO2. You can look at the biology in the soil and how much it's breathing and living and determine obviously the impacts of your management. So you and I were having that conversation about cannibalism from a completely different aspect. So all right, go ahead and jump back on that topic and kind of explain that idea.
Well, I will, and it's just one of these deals, and it's nothing to be, I guess ashamed of or like anything like that. It's just, we've just been so disconnected in how things are supposed to work. We were all, most of us were formally trained that way. We looked at the physical and the chemical side of everything. That's right. Pretty much reductionist. Mm-hmm. A reductionist looked at this in human nature. We feel like that, we're smart enough that we can just force feed nature and make it do what we want it to do. And, and that's the way I was my whole career there for a whole time, and what I ended up doing is instead of fixing problem, I was just treating symptoms with diapers. And, if you define a diaper, that's just a device used to temporarily store crap until proper management addresses the whole situation. Right. What I mean? So, we got to looking, and then you was talking about, I made a statement that, straight legumes are going to cannibalize your soil. Well, the reason why is, these soils, all they're wanting to do is get in a balance. Basically, from an organic nutrient pool, they're wanting to get in a balance. Mm-hmm. So where this aha moment came to me is we had one of our real high-producing fields, and we had actually just pulled a 315 bushel per acre dry land National Corn Grower Association yield off this thing. I mean, hopping good corn for down here. Won the state, we were proud of this son of a gun. So in our mind, we were going to prime this thing. This was in 14, so we was going to prime it for the 16 corn crop. And we came in with a straight Austrian winter pea cover crop, about 30 pounds per acre. We was going to pump the nitrogen in this son of a gun, and then we was going to follow it with soybeans, pumping more nitrogen, then with another cover crop mix, so we was just going to put the nitrogen in this thing. Mm-hmm. Well, the day after we took that harvest, I was out on the land. TV show was down here filming our episode, and I was running infiltration rates in that field, and just everywhere we'd put a ring, we was exceeding 20 inches per hour. Well, the following spring, beans were about 2 inches tall, and all people, Ray Arculetto was down here touring the county. We was learning from each other, and we went to this field, and I took infiltration rates. I could not get an infiltration rate over 4 inches per hour in this whole field. And I was like, what in the crap's going on? Well, I had no aggregation. So just to simplify it, all right, I had put all this protein. Let's just think about nitrogen as a protein source. Well, what does the body have to synthesize protein? It's got to have energy, right? Mm-hmm. What is the only energy that I had in the soil? Just what little energy in the soil is carbon. Okay, no matter what form, whatever it's breaking down, carbon's the energy source. So the only energy source I had for these bacteria to synthesize this nitrogen is what was in my active living soil aggregates. That's the only thing that was readily available. So I had consumed all the carbon to be able to synthesize this overload of nitrogen and deaggregated my soil. And, see it all the time. If we go soybean behind soybean, you'll hear farmers talk about, man, my soil gets tight, can't do nothing with it. That is why. And it's not as much a cannibalization as I called it at one time. The more I even started understanding it more, it's more just an imbalance in the system. We've got an overload of nitrogen that has to be synthesized because this biology, it don't care what we want to do. It's living in its own non-subsidized world down there. It's going to try to take care of itself. And, and that's, where do we get weeds at? Weeds, now don't get me wrong, we can promote weeds and non-desirables through mechanical disturbances and, tillage and all that business. But most of the time they're a first responder trying to get the carbon nitrogen ratio back in balance in the soil. And we will deaggregate the soil with these straight, clover plantings. And don't get me wrong, I was guilty of it too back in the day. I mean, I was planting, these silver bullet clovers, it's going to say, just make the best hunting plots. And don't get me wrong, there'll be stuff come out there and eat the darn stuff. However, from an ecological standpoint, everything was out of balance in the soil, and that's one of the things I like about, kind of what some of the things you're doing with some of these real diverse mixes, like you mentioned the spring reload mix, and, I can't quote everything in it, but it's got a big, highly diverse with species, from different legumes, different cereals, different brassicas. And, what I'm going to be the first to say, I don't understand or I cannot intellectually just draw out all the synergistic interactions that happen with diverse species, diverse cover crops. But what I've come to, realize is there's no sense in arguing nature. Man, they got it going on. And when these diverse mixes, all we're doing, is emulating the diversity of nature, and you don't have to understand all these synergistic effects. Just accept them. It is working, and there's something going on, because look at any natural ecosystem in the world. There ain't a natural monoculture anywhere. And if it does, it fails and goes back into something that's got diversity if we'll stand back and leave it alone.
That's right. And I'm going to jump in there, and that's one of the things, one of the reasons I always like talking to you, because your ability to observe is quite keen, and that's why I just sit back, as I'm trying to do now, and just listen. But you're right. This whole, the synergistic or the synergy that's going on. I don't know. There's been so many times where I've just sat there. People ask me, why aren't you killing deer? Why haven't you killed a buck? Or why, it's not of interest to me anymore. I sit in the blind and I'll buy a better Swarovski spotting scope just so I can, look at bite count and see exactly what they're eating. And it just fascinates me. Sometimes they will get on one particular species or one particular plant group and just wear it out in these multi-species blends. And you just sit there. Well, I guess I sit there and I think to myself, why? Why? And it goes back to the Fred Provenza podcast and his obviously lifetime of amazing work. Why are they wearing that out? And I think, to me, like you said, it's not our job or our role to explain it, control it, or, profit from it, or give it some sexy name, or system. It's nature's system. That's what it is. And all, like you said, all we can do is our best to emulate it. So, man, that was well said.
And it's just, one of the things me and the kids have fun doing when we're out hunting and stuff, when when those slickheads start piling in these fields is, guess what they're going to eat first. That's something I didn't do when I was growing up hunting. I mean, me and my dad wasn't sitting there, wonder what she's going to eat first. And and it's pretty cool to see what they'll pick out, and they'll do it at different times, And I think one thing that we can challenge ourselves as land managers, just, I don't know if anybody's listening here that's sitting over you may be sitting over a monoculture right now, deer hunting, but instead of, ask yourself, if that slickhead's out there right now over a monoculture, challenge yourself to be, ask yourself, what am I to find that critter that I could be providing for? What could I be doing better for her if we had a diverse mix out there right now? How much better could I be doing?
Well, one of the things that I've always focused on as a wildlife biologist who likes deer is recruitment rate, right? So we can't, and obviously, the number of deer that we can kill is a function of the number of critters that we can recruit into the population. It's really that simple. So I start to, I focus on recruitment rate a lot, both in observation and trail cam surveys and, any kind of surveys. One thing we've noticed in the last 2 years, but more so this year, after already having, 2-3 years of this under our belts here on my farm in Pennsylvania, we are absolutely overrun. And man, Adam, I'm telling you, I've had the place now for 12 years. We're overrun with fawns. I mean, we are seeing more and more does with 3 and 4 fawns. You can't, I know if there's any deer biologists listening, we've only killed 2 does in 12 years. And one was my son just wanted to kill one. And I killed one as a filler for a TV show with a bow. We don't need to kill them. And there's a lot of reasons going into that. That's a whole other topic, but as a result of what we're doing, the recruitment rate is absolutely through the roof.
Well, and there's an increase, I think, which I'm not a wildlife biologist. I'm just a deer hunter and just kind of an observer of things I've seen. Yes, the recruitment rate is going to increase, but also what we got to understand is, you may be seeing more fawns and stuff because not only is the recruitment rate increasing, but the predation is shifting back into more of a natural balance. Whereas, if you didn't have as much carrying capacity, these multi-species food plots or these multi-species cover crop fields that we're doing, not only are they affecting the forage balance and the recruitment rate, but they're also bringing in other critters that we're not hunting, different, like for us, the prairie voles, different other little, they're just all critters that, but folks kind of get a bad rap on the coyotes, and on, killing fawns.
That's right.
And don't get me wrong, a coyote will kill a fawn, but a coyote won't kill near as many fawns when his belly's full on southern prairie voles and other critters that populations and recruitment rates are also increasing because we're creating this habitat. There's just not a lot of habitat in a clean no-till field or a plowed field.
Yeah, and you're getting back to, we just got off of a 2-part podcast series on primarily coyotes, but predator-prey relationships. And, actually, I'm going to read this. Let me see if I can find it here in your email to me. Here it is. It says this is from you. I got a kick out of this. There's nothing more satisfying these days for Adam than watching a mama doe and her fawn in a diverse cover crop field graze while flushing butterflies out of the blooms as they step and making grasshoppers hop into that old hen's beak while that coyote pounces prairie vole on the same acre. And to me, obviously, a few minutes ago, you're talking about putting arrows through rib cages. And I teased you a little bit calling you Aldo Leopold on that one, but well, you're right. As you start to return back to a functioning ecosystem, and you allow those predator-prey relationships to come back into balance, there's a ripple effect that I don't think we'll ever be able to identify. And you mentioned obviously reductionist science and peer-reviewed science, and I've probably read more peer-reviewed science than most. I don't put as much weight on that anymore. I still love reading the science. Take it with a grain of salt, and I make my own observations from it. But I 100% agree with you on the ripple effect across the entire ecosystem as we start to work on soil health that builds on everything else.
Yeah, and it's, and that came from, I was observing a field, there mid-spring before we was planting, and they was, a mama doe and previous year's yearling out there feeding, and we were getting late enough in the season. We were starting to get some pollinators and some bugs flying around this field, and I happened to notice there in that field, it wasn't 30 yards away, that there's a hen turkey out there feeding, and then all of a sudden, just right there in the same area, noticed a darn coyote out there. I don't know what critter he was trying to catch, but I know he wasn't trying to bite on the fawn's leg, and it just kind of was an aha moment to me. It's like, Daugherty, this has got bigger effects than just getting producers, through droughts, getting their soil healed, where they'll have more productive ag land for growing corn and soybeans. This has got a bigger effect than that. And it's just one of them moments like, man, that's pretty cool. And when you start seeing stuff like that, you start having appreciation for understanding, just try. I don't know if we'll ever understand nature, but just trying to work with her and mimic some of her natural principles and let some of this stuff work out.
That's right. Well, why don't you, I know you've put Coffee County kind of on the map down there. Why don't you talk a little bit about who you work with as far as your growers, your row crop production, and then how, what you see, in no-till. I've got farmers in my area that say, yeah, this no-till's great, but it's but. And they've got, single species cover crops. So they're not firing on all cylinders. They're hitting what they think is going to be the fix, but they're missing the diversity in the cover crops. So why don't you talk a little bit about, I know you've had a huge impact, and I'm real proud of you on that county down there. In fact, I'm currently looking for a property in Tennessee, and you might attract me to your county just because of the impact you're having. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
You better get your billfold ready.
I thought you'd partner with me 50-50.
There we go. Just a little bit of history. I'd worked for NRCS for a while and went through the range as a soil con, into a district conservationist, then went into management with NRCS. And, be honest with you, it all happened, was forced to go to a seminar and listen to Archuleta talk. And
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's just a dang aha moment. And I got to thinking about it, and it's like, told boss man, I said, first chance I get to get back to a field, to a county, a high ag county that I like, I would like the opportunity. And lo and behold, it wasn't 4 or 5 months later, the DC here in the county I started in, Coffee County, retired. And, Coffee County, it's been long-term no-till for a long time, since the inception of no-till. We've got some very progressive, what I call, long-term no-tillers here, very conservation-minded producers. So, there was no better place to try to make a go of this. Not only we have progressive producers, but we've got as good a climatic conditions to grow just about anything we want down here. Got a long growing season. We can get covers planted, get plenty of biomass, so it's a spoiled place to work. We're not battling latitude.
I agree. And that's honestly at this point in my life, I'm trying to find a much bigger spread to sort of settle in my older years. And I've been fortunate to be able to travel to all these, different ecoregions and all over the whitetails range. And that's why quite frankly, Tennessee, it is a target to me. It's a target state. And I hope the politics stay the way I want them to. I don't want you to comment on that, but I've got a pretty extensive list of check marks to meet. But, you're right. From an ecology, from an environment, Tennessee is just, to me, it's a home run for whitetail managers and wildlife managers, period. If you're into buying land, but go ahead.
Yeah. And it's, from a wildlife standpoint, the Midwest gets a lot of notoriety, but if our wildlife, if they can get some birthday cake poisoning down here and see that 4th and 5th birthday, it's pretty impressive what can happen. Mm-hmm. Down here. But back to just kind of what we done here, is I just wanted to make a run at this, and read, studied, YouTube trained, anybody I could reach out to. I learned just enough to get dangerous before I got started on this, and then luckily had a bunch of good farmers that I was able to learn from, and it's been very highly programmatic driven. We have subsidized the far out of this movement we've had here in the county. In the last 7 years, we spent upwards over $10 million investing in changing the way we farm down here through government cost share programs, state cost share programs, just anywhere that we could find dead presidents to help the folks. We didn't really care where they came from. But, I started out with 5 or 6 producers that first fall. We had about 2,000 acres into these systems. The next fall, we was up to say 15 producers or so. And then it got up to a high at one time. I had about over 70 producers, and 3/4 of the county that were, planting covers. And that's dwindled down some. It's not for everybody. It's a logistical nightmare. Just to be honest with you, it's hard to plant a crop, harvest a crop at the same time. And it's just not for everybody, but we've got about 30, 35 producers, and we're covering every year at least over half of the county acres in cropland in these covers. And we started out in just basically enhanced no-till, where we was planting about a 5-species mix, burning it down before it got, much up to the knees where we wasn't scared of it, and then just going back in at no-till. And that was good, and we're seeing some strides in that. And then I guess in 16, kind of had a wet spring where luckily we couldn't get the sprayers in the field. So all of a sudden we had, 15, 20,000 acres of stuff that was turned into biomass. And when you got that much, you got a problem. You got to learn how to manage it. And it was a godsend for us. It got us over the fear of planting into biomass. Crops were good. And then it let me, along with these farmers, start studying, looking at these effects we can have by letting this biomass go just a couple more weeks to where the carbon nitrogen ratio is high enough that this residue that we put down on the ground, now we're keeping the soil covered throughout the whole growing season. And, just from a real simple standpoint, takes the impact out of the rainfall, keeps our soil where it's aggregated, keeps the soil cool, weed suppression, all that, mainline stuff that you read about. But then you got to start digging in it deeper. And at this time we were running a study across about 58 of these fields and pulling a lot of analytical data with, the Haney test, and then sending off phospholipid fatty acid analysis. And when we started letting the biomass go and getting it crimped down, that's when I started seeing the big time increases in our fungal component coming back into the soil. That's when our CO2 respiration started really, really getting higher. That's when we was maintaining the infiltration rates throughout the whole growing season. And, we're seeing the physical indicators as well, but then it was getting backed up with some of these analytical indicators. And that was, the aha moment. We got over the fear of the biomass, the green planting, and then it just became, common practice. And of course, human nature, if a little bit's good, then a whole lot more's better. So, the following year we got into this SASQUATCH habitat. I'm talking crazy stuff where we're crimping down 18,000 pounds of biomass, just crazy stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's a fine line between not enough and too much from a management standpoint. And then as you mature in these systems and start studying, then you start looking at the carbon nitrogen ratios of, how you're affecting the organic nutrient cycle of how this is all affecting and tying in. I mean, this is a 3-hour technical talk.
No, that's
Jason,
the fun part. I know.
No,
that's the fun part. I think you just glossing over it and mentioning it is a relief for me, because there are some consultants in my industry now, in the wildlife part of it, who claim to be in soil health and regenerative agriculture, which I'm not sure I'm a fan of that term anymore. I think it's all about soil health, but none of them are looking at carbon nitrogen ratios. Some of them have mentioned it, in a podcast or a webinar, but nobody's conducting. Very few are conducting Haney tests, and that was one of the things that excited me about you. Is I was conducting a bunch of Haney tests all over the country with clients, and really just like you mentioned, it kind of becomes an art, and you pull one lever, push one button, and now you're into a whole nother group of weeds with it. But
And it's, when we learned it's very dynamic. There's no recipe for this. It's different on Tuesday morning than it was Monday afternoon. And, it's all the time changing. So we got to be very dynamic in our approach and shift on the fly management decisions, how we manage this stuff. But it's, just to sum up all that stuff is, in general, the more we mimic nature, we started understanding the better off we are. And, that goes into production ag, and it leads right into, the work that you're doing with this wildlife management. The more diverse we are, the more we mimic nature, the better off our crops were, the better off our soil health was. Everything was ticking, going the right way. And it goes right into the wildlife aspect, except, one of the things that excites me about the wildlife aspect is, my guys here, we can't be improving soil health and taking yield losses. Mm-hmm. That dog ain't going to hunt. But when you're just managing these food plots and stuff, you're not having to make over 200 bushel corn and make 70 bushel beans to be successful. And, in the production side of things, I'm not really one of these cold turkey guys. I'm more of we got to get the soil primed, and then we can start looking at different formulations that's better for the soil health from an input standpoint. Reductions are down the road a long ways. We've got a big system here that we're asking this resource to do something it was never designed to do anyways. The soil was never designed to pump out 250 bushel corn to make 60,000 pounds of biomass in 5 months. That's right. The way the system's designed to work. Right. But in a wildlife management standpoint, you can take these idle spots, these food plot areas, and prime these summer guns with a lot of diversity, like in some of your mixes that you've got put together. Yes, they're prime. You're getting a lot of diversity out there from a forage standpoint that's good for the critters eating them. But what the beauty of all these diverse mixes that we can plant is, real quickly we can prime the soil and get enough carbon flowing in the ground. And one of the key things that's still kind of hard to understand, but with this diversity, we really start increasing the mycorrhizal component of the soil in the biology. And from the fungal standpoint, that's where we're really able to start capitalizing on the organic nutrient pool. And where your goal is in these food plots is not to grow 200 bushel corn, but to be able to grow a nice, lush, diverse cover crop or food plot, as y'all call them in your industry. See, we can cycle enough organic nutrients pretty quick in this transition to be able to grow plenty of biomass, plenty of forageous species out there for our wildlife goals. We don't have to have, this tremendous organic nutrient cycle to be able to grow these food plots, as opposed to, say, a 250 bushel corn crop. Yeah. And that's the exciting point to me for a wildlife manager is, once you get these systems started, you think, well, these mixes, they're kind of expensive. They're pretty dang cheap when you're not having to put out 300 pounds of dry fertilizer and run 3 spray trips across them every year just to be able to grow a clover plot. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I perhaps too well. And I struggle with that all the time when guys say, man, that's pretty expensive, 150 or whatever per acre. Yeah, but you're not looking at the whole picture. And like you said, it's not for everyone, but most people can see the benefits. But, I wanted to go back and drill on that whole idea. First of all, I had like 17 different directions I wanted to go, but I like my listeners to hear this stuff from other people, not me. But were you talking about, being a producer or let's call them a farmer, so my listeners understand who we're talking about? Obviously their livelihood depends on it, and like you said, they, when they see yield, crash, it's their worst nightmare. In the wildlife world, the reason I got excited on the soil health part initially is, like you said, we can go cold turkey. And I hear some other consultants or, one other consultant, trying to, he's confusing it, and he's trying to bring over, the production ag wean off, obviously I still work with some guys who love their corn and soybeans, and including, well, not me anymore, but I've got some of them myself. But, we're going to wean this system off of, being heavily addicted to inputs. And, I always tell clients, will say to me, all right, I want to get away from these inputs, and I want to do what you're talking about. I want to do this regen thing. And I say, okay, are you addicted to crack? Are you addicted to anything? Whether it's, some strange addiction. They're like, no, not really. Some of them will be honest and they'll throw something out. And I'll say, well, you are now addicted to heroin. And that so you understand this isn't going to be an easy climb. If we go cold turkey, if you research what that does to drug addicts, it's not a pretty sight. And we're shocking the system. And the more diversity we can get into it, and the more resilient we can make this system, the quicker we can accomplish these goals. So that's what excited me also about the whole idea, is that we can afford to go cold turkey, and we don't have to worry about major dents in our income. And one of the eye openers for me, I don't think it's a secret at this point. I've been working on an in-field testing technique that essentially looks at the biology. So I'm a wildlife biologist. This whole soil biology thing has made sense to me from the very get-go. So I've got this tool, this sensor that I'm gonna make available here soon when I'm comfortable with it. And I went locally here in my county and did this with my 10-year-old daughter. She was fascinated by it. We drove to the to the northwest of me in a conventional ag field and studied the CO2 in a 30-second reading. And in 30 seconds, we got these numbers don't mean anything other than the relative difference. Now, this conventional farmer, heavy inputs. In fact, he told me the first batch of fertilizer was bad, so he applied more. Figured chew on that one for a while. And then plowing. I mean, the guy, they plow, they heavily pulverize their soil. Monocultures, sometimes covers, but this particular ground was not owned by him. It was a lease, so obviously he didn't have covers on it. They tend to, some of the farmers in my area tend to treat their owned property different than what they do their rent properties. So we tested this in 30 seconds and we got about, I think it was 1,100. We had a couple of readings at 900, a couple of readings at 1,100. So, roughly 1,000 parts per million. And that tells us again, as you know, how much biology is simply breathing in oxygen and breathing out CO2. So we jump into pickup and we go about 2.5 miles to a long-term no-tiller who I know, a young farmer, second or third generation though, just killing it on his yields, minimizing inputs, super diverse covers. We check his field, which, by the way, his corn is instantly, for my 10-year-old daughter, she's like, wow, look at the difference in this. It's bright green. It's already canopied over. It's amazing. We're hidden down in this, somewhat squatchy cornfield with residue still on the soil, by the way. And this corn at this point is probably, I don't know, 4 feet tall. And we checked the CO2 and it was over 6,000. It was, I can't remember, 62, 64. It's in a journal somewhere. Now, which one do you think has more life in the soil? Which system do you think has been not only primed, but is operating on not more than all cylinders? It was even my 10-year-old daughter. And that's why I like this tool the most. I can't wait to get one in your hands because you just sit back and you're like, how can you argue with that? It's pretty amazing what life in the soil can do for growing nutrient dense plants.
Yeah. And, and it's, there's the 4 main principles is out there, reducing disturbance, keeping it covered, a living plant, and, a lot of diversity, and to me, it's a simple, if you can't get that and understand it, it's just, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, that stuff's just common sense. And don't get me wrong, that's kind of where I got my start. And, what just, was the slap in the head aha moment for me. But what's cool is when we start looking looking into these systems deeper. Okay, those are the hows. Those principles are the hows. But when we start finding the whys behind them, you know what I mean? And like the tool you're describing, which I'm not that familiar with the exact tool, whichever one you're using, but all right. So we got the numbers. Now why? And then I like to look into them deeper. Okay, so you've got the 1,000 to the 6,000 comparison, and that's cool, and that lets you know, all right, I have, we can just assume right there that my population, my biological population, it is higher in that one field, and it's got to be doing good things. Then what the cool part is when we start breaking down that population, looking at the ratios, and that's what I've got to do on the production side. When we start looking at the inputs and everything, I can have a high biological population, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And let's just think about it like as a car factory, okay? But if all I got in my population is, say, high bacteria, so all I've got is high frame builders in the car building, well, I'm still not going to be able to produce a car. I've got to have the frame builders, I've got to have the motor builders, I've got to have everybody. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I may not need but so many motor builders to get enough motors built to make the production line run. And that's the way I've got to start breaking down this biology. And and one of the key indicators with me is, all right, CO2 respiration. That tells me that is a indicator of population. Okay, now I've got to have my demographics on that population. How many bacteria do I have? How many protozoa? And really, what I key in on is is the fungal aspect. Mm-hmm. And when I start seeing that fungal aspect increase to a certain range, and I don't really want to put numbers out because the numbers that I know are for my region. Right. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want everybody to say, well, Daugherty said if you get a fungal to bacteria ratio with this, then you're ready to go. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, you already said you like butterflies and sending arrows through rib cages. So that's on.
So, but well,
no, I agree. I totally agree with you.
But that's the cool. And that's something that from a wildlife standpoint, once you start seeing these fungal increases and stuff as with clients, that's when all right, now we're at this stage right here that we can be pretty confident that we're going to be able to start cycling enough organic nutrient pool.
That's right.
That we're going to be able to grow. We may be getting to the point now, hey, that we've got an organic nutrient pool. Now maybe we can start intercropping. You say you got some guys that want to grow production corn. Now's the time maybe that here's where you can go grow that 120 bushel production corn where you prime this soil in these food plot settings. And there's just some cool things that can be done with wildlife. One of these deals, just the intercropping deal. So you got some production corn guys. Well, let's go into looking at strip cropping where you set up the corn strips. That way you got all these different, you got these skinnier row or strips of corn where you got more sunlight getting into it, where you can capitalize on solar radiation on that corn. Well, what better thing to do in between the strips on these things is to work with some of these diverse mixes, not only for grazing the wildlife, taking the pressure off the cash crop, but look at the benefits. Like, say, for example, if you got a listener, say he's leasing a farm off of a producer and working on some of these food plots, him planting a straight clover food plot to hunt over is not going to have a big time effect on pollination on some of these crops. But what if he goes in there with one of these multi-species things that's, a little odd area that he's got this food plot in that's bordering this producer's corn crop? Mm-hmm. There's going to be drastic different effects on beneficial insects and pollinators that helps with the disease and pollination of that crop. Just from, so there's an opportunity for, if you're a hunter leasing a farm and working with a producer, try some of these things on that, and he's going to start seeing a benefit on his cash crop based off what you're trying to do to attract the wildlife. That at first he is mad because it's just going to eat more of his crops.
Yeah. And, next to dramatically improving soil health, one of the biggest return on investments we've had as far as either observing wildlife or actually harvesting wildlife in food plots has been the research we're doing with clients on intercropping. I mean, we've got some pretty cool setups. I've got a John Deere 7000. I think I sent you pictures. It's corn beans alternating, and then I can even those are on 17-inch rows, and I could even intercrop between that if I want to. And we've got clients. Yeah. We've made intercropping blends, and man, you want to talk about. I've always said if you look at a billboard, when these advertising agencies obviously make money based on how much of that billboard is covered, and they're not going to cover half of it, and they're certainly not going to cover 33% of it. In fact, in the cities now, they scroll, right? They go through 3 or 4 different entities, and that's obviously increasing revenue streams. But I always felt like looking at a cornfield from a wildlifer's perspective, not a production ag perspective. It was like a billboard that had strips taken out, maybe covering 33 1/3 or whatever percent. So when we get into intercropping, and again, there's some logistics to it, and there's, some additional mechanical tweaks, or perhaps even the purchasing of another piece of equipment. But to diversify that and offer it all in one field or one plot has been, oh my gosh, absolutely amazing. Talk about a buffet.
Yeah, and I see, on these hunting shows and everything, you got the ATVs, and they've got some kind of rinky-dink disc, and they're driving around in circles, blowing up motors on ATVs, trying to work up ground. And
I saw that same show. I don't watch them anymore, but I saw that same show.
I ain't cutting on them. I just blew up 4-wheelers before using it, so it hit home with me. And then I look, and then they got the little red whirlybird cedars, and they worked all day just, to get that where they could put seed on it. And knowing what I know now, I'd rather them have a diverse blend, go cut them a log and drive around and drag a log and knock down what's over it. You'd be amazed at how much better a food plot you're going to end up having, less weed pressure and everything, and it's just, I don't know, it just a lot of aha moments come in.
Yeah. Speaking of aha moments, and by the way, my first food plot was heavily disked with a small rinky-dink disc. I think Summit made it at the time, and I actually found an old hollowed out log that the logger had left, and that was my cultipacker, and the stand came up incredibly well. Obviously, a dysfunctional system and different than what we're talking about now, but. From an aha moment standpoint, I've got several clients who they hear this and they're on board 100%. Obviously, they're paying me, so they're like, "Listen, I'm in. Let's do it." And of course, I get to know my clients pretty well. And I've got one this year. Just wanted to kill. He hunts all over the country, all over the world, and wanted to kill this mature buck, in the worst way. He ends up killing it with a bow pretty early. And he's got 2 boys, and they're, he's going cold turkey, right? So there has been no biocides, no synthetic fertilizers, just diversity. Obviously, we run Haney tests, and we're pushing buttons and pulling levers, and there's a whole lot more to it. But he was concerned I think he was hunting maybe Iowa or Texas, I don't know. He said, when I get back, I've got 1 son left that needs to kill, and they kill mature bucks only. Needs to kill a buck. And I was like, all right, well, let me know how it goes. And he gets back and he's sending me pictures. He's like, man, I'm so spoiled, from 10 years of 6-foot tall forage soybeans and, beautiful monoculture, heavily sprayed clover plots, that I'm concerned that this 2 inches of growth, we're not going to see any deer. And sure enough, the first evening he sends me a picture from a blind, and there were like 36 or 37 deer in the field. And he's like, what are they eating? I don't get it. He's losing his mind. This is insane. This isn't, I don't have any tonnage. I don't have any yield, but there's plants out there, and they're 2 and 3 inches tall, but these fields are just filling up. And all the neighbors, by the way, buy seed from me also, or several of them. And they're planting Still, most of them are in the monoculture, and they're disking and plowing, and they're planting some of my older blends, which I don't really recommend to most people. And sure enough, the first evening, he kills a really, really nice buck. And he said to me, he sent me a text. He said, "I'm sold." I said, "What do you mean you're sold?" He's like, I understand these ugly plots now. I think you're onto something. I don't know if they're more nutrient dense. I don't know if they're more palatable. I don't know if they're more attractive. I really don't care. There's definitely something going on. He said, but it bothers me to look out into this field and not see, at least a foot or 2 feet of growth, depending on obviously what it is. But so that's to me, that's the reward in all this, is having a client have an aha moment. He was at the point where he was like, listen, I think next year, you said it best, it's not for everybody. He was like, next year, maybe we take a couple of plots and just do it the old way, do it old school. Maybe not as bad, let's be responsible with fertilizer and herbicide applications. But man, I need to see some, 14, 16 inch tall brassicas. And now he's like, listen, I'm 100% in. I tried to sell him some of the older blends instead, so he had something that kind of calmed his nerves, and he was like, "I want all reload. I'm 100% in. We're doing it." So that's super cool for me to see now.
And it is, and I mentioned, I'm not a cold turkey guy in what I do. It's not gonna. I'll lose all my customer base if I go in and try to cold turkey, and that's not my goal.
No.
Like I said, I want to mimic nature, and all these things that are out there are tools. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with tools used in the right conditions. Like for me, I'll just, and this may not go against or exactly with the philosophy of what you're trying to do, but if I'm going to make this transition, say from an idle grass field into a diverse cover, me personally, I will use a herbicide on a establishment. Mm-hmm. I will go out and burn down and kill on that first time before I plant. For example, if we're going in this spring with like your spring reload mix. Mm-hmm. I'm probably going to use that herbicide as a tool at the beginning, to be able to reduce that competition and have more success with that spring reload. But then going forward with that good, I get that good stand right there. Then I come back in. I'm probably not going to have to use that tool. If I've got a crimper, then I'm not going to have to use that tool again to establish my summer plot, mm-hmm. and then not again. But, if I don't have that crimper, I'd much rather there's a lot less detrimental effect on the biology. Let's say I don't have that crimper, than to go in and disc up that biomass to establish the next one. So we gotta kind of look at what tools we use and use the ones that have less detrimental effect. And if we can get away from all of them in the food plotting, man, that's great. Mm-hmm. We're going to see. Don't get me wrong. The more you can get away from that, the more that we're going to be able to get the quicker. Every time we're doing something detrimental, we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So it's going to take you longer to get to the finish line with that than if you're just moving forward the whole time.
Yeah, but, absolutely. 100% I agree. And we call it the art of the start. It's like the old, old Guy Kawasaki art of the start, right? We've used, and I want to see that first stand really shine. And we've used everything from bison to fire, to obviously chemical to, Haney did a test with, Spring Reload where he used the biggest ripper in the world. I thought he was, reclaiming a mine. And we came in after with Spring Reload and the diversity and the biology. That stuff is so resilient. I'm not promoting destroying it. We've done that for years, but that stuff bounced back.
If it wasn't resilient, think where we'd be now.
Exactly. And it's amazing when you give it what it wants, how quickly it bounces back. But
and they don't want nothing but diversity and sunshine. And like that client you were referring to, well, there is different inputs than dry triple 19 salt. You know what I mean? There's ways to feed to, increase the, the growth through supplemental nutrition besides, just our traditional means. And that's what we've shifted to here in the production side is, potash is extreme, salt, one of the main things we look at is when we start reductions is I'm looking at reduction in salt load from our traditional nutrient sources, from potash, different forms that we can get potassium in that kind of business, from that simply to liquid nitrogen, moving to Y drops, and using UAN that's loaded with the sugars and humic acids and the chelated forms. That's yes, it is commercial nitrogen. However, it's a lot less salt load, and it's, there's ways that we can still manage and promote growth by do inputs that are, I'm not going to say biologically friendly, but they're better than other ways.
There's a happy medium to everything. Yeah. I'm going to interrupt you because that was the perfect teaser and lead in to the podcast I want to do with you next. We've approached, actually gone over an hour already, and I don't like to go too long anymore. I want to do another podcast with you in the future, sort of a teaser if you're willing, and really talk about, perhaps the art of the start, get into this whole idea of, row crop production a little bit more, because, a lot of the wildlifers are wanting to produce. I'm not saying we need to hit that 300 plus bushel corn, but, we'd like to produce 150 bushel corn with minimal inputs and really learn how to, obviously this is what I work, with my clients on, and it's always a work in progress. So I think if we did a part 2, I wanted to introduce you and really just get into some of the, your history and, the things that you've done there in Coffee County. We have a lot of listeners in Tennessee, and obviously I wanted to serve them up some good content. But I think in a future podcast, we really talk about this whole idea of rejuvenating agricultural row crop production. Again, they may not be planting hundreds of acres, but they may want to have 1 to 30 acres of corn with minimal input. So I want to get into the salts. I want to get into all that good stuff later on. But buddy, I do appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy during the holidays.
Man, it's been a pleasure. It's an honor for you to ask me to talk to your listeners, and be glad to do however many of this. You said we went over an hour. I talk a little bit slow, so you gotta account for that when you get those slow talking Tennessean on here.
That's all right. We'll apply that calibration and plan for the next one. I think the next one can be over an hour for sure, but I wanted to sneak this one in here today. And again, super appreciate you being on. Hang around here. I want to talk to you a little bit more about a couple of things, and I appreciate you. But for the rest of you, again, I appreciate everybody for spending the time with us, the input, the emails, the phone calls, the texts. Man, it's just been amazing this year. And it's not my intention to blow out an enormous amount of content, but I like to find, as I said to a new client of mine in South Carolina, we just signed a contract to do a really, really fun project in the next 3 to 5 years. He said, I love the fact that you find these unique people in pockets, around the country that you don't hear recycled on other podcasts. I'm paraphrasing. So that's always been my goal. And again, I get to have these conversations with super intelligent and experienced guys like Adam. I just wanted to share the formality of it and the content. So thanks everyone for listening. Looking forward to the new year. We've got some really super good podcasts lined up. Adam mentioned PLFA. In my opinion, there's only 1 or 2 really good soils labs in the country. Contrary to what others believe, that's my opinion. So we'll be talking about PLFA and, of course, the Haney test more. Dr. Rick Haney is going to be on with us plenty more in 2021. But I will ask one more favor. If you could do me a huge favor, We do not, obviously, I don't have advertising. This is fully, produced and financed through my companies, Drop-Tine Wildlife Consulting and the Seed Company. So if you could go on your iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast, subscribe to it. Don't just download it and listen to it. Subscribe to it first, then download it and listen to it. And give us a review and a rating, preferably 5 stars. And the reviews are really cool and fun to read. And obviously those are helpful to folks who are trying to decide if they want to add that particular podcast to their library. And of course, it's a competitive space these days. There's more and more podcasts coming out. So please go on and review it and rate it. And of course, subscribe to it. So thank you everybody for listening, and have a happy new year. And until next time.